Hello everyone, and yeah, thanks a lot for the invitation. My name is Matthias, and I'm not alone here. I brought Gizella and Laurent with me, two students from us. And yeah, when we first heard about this conference and got the invitation to present the University Center, we thought like that's a bit far-fetched because, well, we have two master programs about coastal and marine management and one about coastal communities. And then we said like, it's a lot about the coast, so where's the forest in that? And when you see our university center here in the Westfjords, just around the corner, that's where I work, where Gizella and Laurent are studying. You don't see too many trees, you don't see anything that is related to a forest, but then I thought like, yes, maybe we are a little bit related to forests, and not only because we have our very own forest and close to Rapseri. We have our graduation ceremony there every year and plant our own tiny little forest. So every student that graduates, so you two in the future as well, can or will get a tree, and so we plant that, and so we have a tiny little Háskólasetrið forest there with 200 trees. But then I thought, okay, that is a bit poor to just talk about that at a forest conference. And then I thought like, okay, after a brief presentation of what we do, I will give the floor to Laurent and Gizella, who will present their ideas, because our students all write a master thesis after their studies or after the coursework is done, and they can choose their own projects, independent projects, and we always search for international collaboration. But a lot of students have an interest in writing their master thesis in and about Iceland or the Westfjords, and I know their interests. And they are definitely related to the Westfjords and related to forests. So we saw like, okay, maybe we actually have something that we can share with you. And after their input, I will close this 15-minute talk with a short presentation of an international research project that is actually about climate change and the social impacts in Iceland, but also in other Nordic countries. So yeah, we have two master programs. Both are about the coast, and we have about 40 students per year that study with us. Very interdisciplinary, so we actually go to the forests every now and then, and use that for our courses. But usually our expertise is completely non-forestry related, even though we are absolutely up for it. So if you think like, or if you have an idea for people in the Westfjords, students in the Westfjords, that should look into the relation of the coast and forests, we are very happy to collaborate, share the ideas with the students, and usually students are also very happy when we present the ideas from outside experts or from people that want to use their knowledge, their skills for master thesis or final projects. And just briefly, we have some students that have been looking into forests. The University Center exists since 2005. So in 18 years, we had two master theses that were written about forests. And so it is what you can see here about tourist perceptions of forestry in the coastal landscape of the Westfjords. You can find all the theses that have been written on Skemman. And if you are interested in that, I can share them also afterwards with you, where we can see like how people perceive forests in the Westfjords, especially outsiders' perceptions, local perceptions, and definitely usually our master theses are also coming up with policy recommendations so that we can actually tell people in the Westfjords or the rest of Iceland or give them some advice of what could be done. That counts also for forests. And yeah, just another example from a master thesis being written about the forests around Tálknafjörður and how people perceive them, how the forests developed between 2009 and 2019, and then how people perceived that. But I can share more information on that later on, because I thought like looking back is one thing, it's nice, but looking ahead is even nicer. So I would like to give the floor to two of our students to share their ideas with you. And if you are interested in either being advisors, giving them good advice, you're very welcome to share your thoughts afterwards over coffee with them.
Thank Thank you, Matthias. So yes, we'll be speaking briefly today about forestry projects as thesis at the University Center of the Westfjords, sorry. So talking about a bit of a background and two projects, one about afforestation and repopulation, the other about seedling recruitment, and then our contact info if ever there's some feedback in or other interests in collaboration. So first of all, my name is Laurent Trottier. I'm from Quebec in Canada. I have a bachelor's in urban planning, and I'm currently a student in the master's program of coastal community and regional development at UW.
Hello, my name is Gizella. I am from the state of New York in USA, and I got a bachelor's degree in sciences and biology, focusing in ecology and conservation. So I'm the one who is interested in seedling recruitment here in the Westfjord forests.
Without further ado, we're going to start with the first project, which is my thesis project. And it's still a work in progress, of course, but it's centered on afforestation as a tool of community development in Iceland. Quickly, the aims of the thesis project would be to study the potential and opportunities of community forestry and afforestation as tools of coastal community development in Iceland. So how community forestry and community forestry development can be used to develop and redynamize some regions in coastal regions in Iceland. And it will be based on perceptions of study cases of repopulation and of Scottish woodland crofts, which is, well, we'll talk about it a bit later, but essentially how some areas of the Scottish Highlands are being repopulated and rewilded with the participation of local populations, and how there's a lot of frameworks for forestry resource management by communities in rural and regional areas in the province of Quebec in Canada. So the first study case out of two would be in Quebec, so how community forestry is strongly present in many smaller rural communities. It's a well-established thing, we could say, that some communities have some cooperative frameworks or some local frameworks to manage and to organize themselves for forestry resources in Quebec. So cooperatives, forestry groups, which essentially regroups different stakeholders, landowners, smaller actors in the context, and also industry individuals, essentially to regroup themselves and bring resources to have a more community-oriented management of forestry resources. And in Scotland, as I said, it's also about how community forestry and afforestation redevelopment of what they call woodland crofts, which is an administrative unit in Scotland, but also historically a way of separating and living on land, and how those lots are repopulated and with rewilding efforts, because for a long time in Scotland, rewilding and repopulation were against each other. As we saw, it was perceived that people could not live on land that was rewilded as well because it was dynamically opposed, but more and more researches and papers look into it and see that people are at the center of community rewilding because they are the main actors in that process, but also are the main beneficiaries of the process of rewilding. The methods for such a project, and of course it's still in the process of developing the thesis project, but and it would be on the study of perceptions of local inhabitants, stakeholders, landowners, and officials of Scottish and Quebecois projects via interviews, which would be either walking interviews or online interviews, which essentially would depend on what is available for those individuals. And it would aim to study the perceptions of afforestation and rewilding of similar actors in selected Icelandic communities. So again, on landowners, farmers, officials, politicians, local inhabitants, and how those projects could be potentially beneficial for those Icelandic communities, and to do a comparative analysis of those perceptions of afforestation as tools of regional development in Iceland. So voila.
Hello, I am interested in the forests in Iceland for a few different reasons. I've been perusing the skógartengd website and reading a lot of literature about afforestation efforts in Iceland. And what I was really curious about is how many of these introduced or imported tree species might be propagating themselves, or is the entirety of afforestation in Iceland reliant on active planting efforts? So I would be wanting to survey the forests in and around Isafjordur and potentially other sites in the Westfjords if I can access them. And I would want to be, once again, investigating, are these seeds recruiting naturally from activities, seed release of the trees themselves, or are the forests really only expanding through activities of forestry? I would also want to try to set up camera traps and see what the potential role of local fauna is in the dispersal of seeds or seed predation. So this would include local birds, any rodents, which might be invasive species like house mouse or Norway black rat, which might be difficult way out in the forest as they're mostly around urban centers, but in the forest here close by, I'm wondering if that plays a role as well, and what the potential implications could be in terms of invasive species coming to Iceland. So my methods are largely inspired by a project that I did back in my home state of New York, back home. There was a forest fire in an area that had not burned for decades, and all of these serotinous seed cones opened up, and so subsequent years following, we saw a lot of seed resurgence, and so I would be copying their methods of transects with quadrats along those transects and just doing seed counts within where those transects lie. I would probably classify some categories of dense forest, forest edge, and then more open areas to see perhaps there's some downslope carrying of seeds by wind or water, or how well those faunal species might be distributing seeds as well. So the methods for the seed predators, I would be wanting to set up a camera trap somewhat like this. I found this study, and they were just observing rodent species in a forest. And I would just be employing this type of method and probably baiting the traps with cones of all one type of species in one area, just to see what birds, rodents, any species that might be coming along and interacting with those seeds, either predating upon them or distributing them by, by any other manner. And yes, that is my idea for a project. I would love to hear feedback on this and if that's a feasible method to use in the area. And yeah, just anything. Here is the contact information of both Laurent and myself, and we really would just love to hear any feedback on our ideas, or anybody that you know might be interested in taking on some thesis advisees. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And yeah, I will conclude or finalize this short journey through what the University Center of the Westfjords and our students are doing by pointing to one of the international projects that we are involved in. For Iceland, it's me and Johanna who will follow and talk after me about the Click Nord project, Climate Change Resilience in Small Communities in the Nordic Countries. So that is a project that is running for 2 years now. We are in the third year, which is unfortunately the last year. And this will probably make much more sense in some 15 minutes when you have the impact from the input from Johanna as well, also related to forests and climate change there. So we look into 8 different case study locations with 5 different countries, all around the Nordic countries, except Finland, unfortunately. And yeah, we look into different hazards that are related to climate change and how small and remote communities are dealing with climate change-related natural hazards. Of course, we don't look into forests in Iceland, we look into avalanches, and Johanna will talk about more about that in a few minutes. But we have 2 cases that are somewhat dealing with forests. That is a case in Sweden, the south of Sweden, where they look into wildfires in the forests, and in northern Sweden, where they look into basal ice formation and reindeer herding and the problems people face there, also related more to afforestation and changing forest structures there. And yeah, we want to look into these case study, or into these 8 different case studies, and look how climate change is affecting these places, how people prepare for that, how they understand their own situation, what they need from for society at large to improve their situation, what they need from the civil society organizations, and yeah, how they can prepare and handle adverse events, build capacity for the future. And yeah, not saying much more because the next 15 minutes will be about this project in detail, about the case in Iceland, and I will leave it to the next speaker, Johanna. Thanks.